I'm reading and doing research about the '79 season, as I told you, and obviously, the Daytona 500 is a big part of that year. Probably, what people say, and I agree with this, that race is probably the most important race in the history of the sport because it's the race where we've got flag-to-flag coverage, which was unique. We never really had a full 4-hour TV window. We got 16 million people tuning in, snowed in on the West Coast. You know this story. You lived it. And I'm sure, how many times do you think you've told the story about going down the back straightaway with Cale and ended up in the grass and your brother coming along and the fight and everything else? How many times do you believe you relived that story?
There's no telling.
Yeah.
There's one thing that I say every time it's brought up, just like you just said, it's one of the most important. It is the most.
There you go.
Important race in NASCAR. It is the most talked about race in NASCAR. I don't care about Richard Petty, David Pierce. I don't care about none of that, and they're very important.
Yep.
But the '79 Daytona is the most talked about and the most important race in NASCAR history.
I agree with you. So, with that said, how many times do you relive that moment about what I could have done different? How could have that ended better or differently for me? I mean, do you remember coming off of turn 2?
I remember every bit of it. I remember.
Walk us through.
I remember every bit of it. You know, on the 29th lap of that race, I was leading, got spun out. I don't know by Bobby or by Cale. I don't know which one of them did which. I don't know. Mm-hmm. I just know that we went down through the infield in the mud. And I bent my front end up, knocked my toe out. Well, Bobby actually helped me get it straightened back out when I went back out. You know, they kept coming in and setting the toe back and everything like that. And the last restart, Hoss come on the radio and he said to me, don't worry about Cale. NASCAR says he's at least 5 laps down. Okay. Well, we come to the next caution, and he almost wrecked me going into the travel to make a lap back up. And I said, Hoss, you don't wreck somebody 5 laps down. So anyway, we restart the race, and I'm leading, Cale running second. And I'm going to tell you this. At that time, it was different than it is now. A guy could draft by somebody, but not necessarily could outrun him. Mm-hmm. You know, he might draft by and he get passed right back or whatever. My car, after that wreck, the first wreck, was the best race car I ever had at Daytona Beach. What it been, and that was another thing that upset me after it was over with, and I'll get to that in a minute. But anyway, 5 laps to go in the race. I said to Hoss on the radio, Hoss, don't talk to me. I know where I'm at. I know what's going on. Because Hoss would get on the radio and he'd be asking about having chicken dinner or something crazy.
Yeah.
And I knew, and I was prepared for what would happen coming off turn 4. I was not prepared for what happened coming off turn 2. Mm-hmm. Okay? And I don't know if Dale did driving the car. I never looked at anybody in my mirror in the corner at Daytona Beach. I never did. Never looked up to see where anybody was. For some reason or other, we go into turn 1, and I glance up, and I see him going down. And I said, no way, buddy. Well, we come around to turn 2, and he ran into the back of me. When he did, it knocked me a little bit sideways, and that's when he hit me in the door, and we got side by side. So anyway, then the rest of the crash was over. We get down there in the infield, and I can't answer to this day why I didn't whip his ass. You know, I was the one in the family that had the reputation. I was in 7 fights at the racetrack in my lifetime, and Bobby started 5 of them. And I have no idea, except for the fact, Dale, I was so hurt. You know, this I can say to your dad, okay? The many times that he had to race one at the end and something happened, he wasn't mad. He was hurt. I mean, deep hurt. And here I am, the third, maybe fourth time I should have won the Daytona 500, and I'm in the damn grass, 3/4 of a mile from the start-finish line. And I'm not going to win it again. Well, Bobby shows up. And Cale and I had already pretty well had the words we were going to have. And Cale goes over to Bobby, and I see him, hit Bobby with his helmet through. What the hell's this about? So I go over and I grab Cale by the arm, and I spun him around. I said, if you want to fight, I'm the SOB you need to be fighting with, buddy. And how Bobby Allison got out that fast that day, I have no clue. You don't get out of a race car strapped in with radios on and all as fast as Bobby Allison got out that day. Here he come, and I'd seen that look before because it's my brother. And I never touched a man, and he never touched me. And I said, the good Lord looked out for us twice that day. One time in a wreck, one time he didn't touch me. If he'd ever touched me, I'd have probably killed him. And I mean, it was I didn't think about the fans. I didn't think about none of that at that time. Not until after it was all over with. And after the race, I was down in the garage area, and Bill France Jr. said to me, you should have let him have the apron. When he got to turn 3, he would have had to back off. I said, bullshit. I said, he would have never backed off anyway. And I didn't put him in the apron. He put himself in the apron. I said, he run in the back of me first. Bill Jr. said, well, the film didn't show that. I said, by God, that's what happened. Well, but people don't know, Dale, because Bobby Allison appealed that. They fined me, Bobby, and Cale $6,000 apiece. Going to give us $1,000 back a race for being good behavior. They're going to keep $1,000. But they put Bobby and me on probation, not Cale. And that really hacked Bobby Allison off. So he appealed it. Well, we get a notice they're going to have the appeal at the Red Roof Inn in Atlanta. I didn't appeal it. Bobby did. I go over there. We go in this motel room. They got a big camera thing set up with video and all that stuff. And it's Les Richter, John Riddle, Lance Childers, Joe Epton, Bill Gazaway. And so everybody shook hands, and everybody, how y'all doing, and everything. I had a big round table set up in the corner over here, and 2 chairs sitting right here. And Gazaway, after the formalities, Gazaway says to Bobby and I'd like to ask you a favor. We'd like to show this wreck one at a time. We have a room rented across the hall, and one can stay in that room while we show the other one. Bobby says, or it showed a film. Bobby says, I didn't appeal the wreck. I don't see the wreck. He said, well, you sit across the hall. Bobby said, yeah. Well, the day before this happened, the day before this deal all got started, I get a phone call. Pat calls me to the phone. Somebody wants you on the phone. Well, I answer the phone, and they say, Donnie, they have a film that shows the wreck. Make them show it to you. Who is this? They have a film that shows the wreck. Make them show you. Click. That was 1979. This is 2023. I still do not know who that person was. I thought it was Jackie Arute. I cornered Jackie. Nope, it wasn't me. He said, I know where the film came from. And he said, Bill France Jr. sent it up there. The film came from Jacksonville. So anyway, then Gazaway said, we have 5 films. We'd like to show this in entirety, and then you comment on it. It's just a wreck. It's not the whole race. So they showed the first one, which is across the infield like everybody saw us. Just 2 cars crashed. They can't tell what the hell's happening. The second one was a little bit more from turn 3 and 4. You could see the cars more coming at you, crashing like this. Third film was one I was looking for. And when it got over with, I said to Gazaway, I said, can you run that in reverse? I tell you to stop. He said, yeah. So he put it in reverse, and when the first contact was showed him hitting me in the back bumper and my car doing like that, I said, stop. Well, it went a few frames past. And I said, can you come back slow motion until I tell you to stop? He said, I come back frame by frame. So in the first contact, I said, stop. I'll never forget what happened if I lived to be 200 years old. Les Richter popped out of his chair, and he said, why in the hell hadn't we seen that film? End of appeal. Now, I heard they put Cale on probation. I heard he appealed. I never talked about that. I don't have any idea. That was the end of the thing, period, paragraph. The end.
Wow. So after that,
that's your whole.
Yeah.
That's the episode.
so what in researching in articles and so forth, I thought that was really, really interesting, and actually really funny because y'all go to Rockingham, which is the next race.
Crash.
And, well, yeah, you did crash. We'll get to that in a minute. But y'all go to Rockingham after the appeal. Y'all, Cale leaves Daytona. He's like, I'm good with the fine. I'll pay it. Y'all went and appealed and get y'all's probation cut in half, and Cale shows up to Rockingham with 3 months of brand new probation that he didn't even have when he left Daytona. And he was like madder than a hornet because he's walking around thinking, yeah, I'm going to pay this fine. Everything's good. And he gets to Rockingham. They're like, hey, guess what, man? The Allisons have won their appeal. They're going to cut their probation from 6 months to 3 months or whatever. And, hey, by the way, you're getting 3 months you didn't know you had because we watched the film, right? And I just feel like that's so funny, like Cale walking around the garage just stomping his feet because he's now got this new part of the penalty that he didn't think he was ever going to have. You guys end up going. It sounds like by the articles and things that I've read that you and Cale did the best you could to give NASCAR the opinion that it was over with. Y'all went fishing, went to dinner. Whatever, y'all talked like, hey man, yeah, we're good pals, we're good. There's pictures of y'all smiling together in the garage at Rockingham a couple weeks after the race. Yeah, there's pictures. And so you and him are like, oh yeah, we're good, no problem. All that's in the past. And then you go out in the first lap or the fourth lap of the next race.
It was further than that.
Right? Well, it wasn't much.
It was a lie about all the rest of that stuff, though.
Yeah, right.
It's a lie? But was that forced?
I wasn't after Cale. I had no use for the man because of what he did. I always respected Cale as a race car driver. But after the Daytona 579, I didn't respect him as a man. I had no intentions of getting another wreck.
Yeah.
But we happened to go to Rockingham, which I always ran good at Rockingham. I liked the place. And I got under him about 4 times down the back straightaway. Where you pass people at Rockingham, you got under them coming off turn 2. And went in turn 3 under him. Mm-hmm. And they were stuck on the outside. He knows he's been there.
Yeah.
And honestly and truthfully, we crashed because I tried not to hit him.
Oh.
I crashed because I got in the apron with the left side instead of staying in the racetrack. What I should have done, and this was, I told Bill France after the race, it's your fault because you put me on probation. If I hadn't been on probation, I'd have just run into him and knocked him the hell out of the way. And, I mean, that's the gospel truth. I mean, that is all I can tell you about that.
Yeah. And so you and him both, y'all get out of the car and you're like, man, that's a racing incident. Both of you remarked that it's a racing, just racing. We're not trying, that wasn't anything intentional. Cale even agrees. That it wasn't, y'all were both trying to make sure that there's no new fines, there's no new probation.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah. And so y'all moved on. And what's interesting, I guess, about that year is later on, you're going. There's some remarks in these articles about you sort of hinting and sharing in the garage that, man, I'm not sure what I'm going to be doing next year. Haas and Hawaiian Tropic's going to cut back, and I don't want to cut back. I want to run 15, 20 races. Haas doesn't want to run that many races. He's scaling back. Y'all had planned, starting 79, to run the full season. And as you got about 8 or 10 races in, Haas says, hey, we're not going to do it. It's too much. And you're a little frustrated by it in some of the comments, but it is what it is. And then, 3/4 of the way through the year, you're already thinking, he's going to scale back even more for 1980. I'm not sure I want to do that. Hey, is there other opportunities out there for me? You'd end up staying, I think, with Haas. But how did that deal end up splitting up? Because eventually you did leave.
Well, actually, Dale, it really started Daytona 500. Well, people don't 79? Know. Yeah, what people don't know is Haas Ellington drove Cale Yarborough home after the race.
He did. I've got some articles about
that.
I
found that out later on.
Yeah.
And I said to myself, what in the, how come? But anyway, things started to deteriorate because of the way Haas kept talking. He didn't want to run all the many races. He didn't want to run. Now, let me tell you something. I don't know how many people know the man Sheldon Pittman called run
yes.
Haas Ellington race. Let me tell you, that man was responsible for that race car running like it ran. The two main guys was Runt and Jackie Rogers. And I promise you, when I drove that car, if I came in and told them we turned the roof upside down, it would run better, they'd turn it upside down. That's the way they felt about me. And I felt the same way about them. Well, things started getting sideways. And as Dale Jr. knows, it started talk, conversation. A lot of things that I said or Haas said that really we didn't say. But I saw the end coming. I didn't really like it, but I saw it coming. And, I can't answer the question why I didn't go into it deeper and put it to bed. But I let it fester up till it got to the point that I did leave. And it was a mutual agreement.
Yeah.
Well, why did he take Cale Yarborough home?
So this is what I learned in the articles. This is what I learned. So Cale flies down there from Timmonsville, where he lives. The storm comes, so Daytona's fine, but nobody can really get home unless they're going to drive. And Cale's got his plane down there. Saturday before the race, he asked Haas if he could ride home with him because Haas had a van, and Haas said yes. They go wreck on the back straightaway, and Haas sees Cale in the garage after the race and says, I know you wrecked my car, it cost me $60,000. I'm pissed off at you, but you still got to ride home. Everybody, I believe, stayed the night Sunday and went home Monday morning.
Yes.
Right? And so because there was no rush to leave out of there. And so they end up, Haas in the articles comes out like, hey, man, I'm a man of my word. I told you get her out home. You still got one.
Yeah, but he didn't say in them articles what the guys felt like. They wanted to bury his butt.
Right. He's riding home with the enemy. And so the funny part is that they're about, they're getting into South Carolina, and Cale's driving at this point and says, Haas, there's a little ice on the road. I'm going to take it easy. And Haas says, just keep it out of the damn grass is all I care about. And so, which is pretty funny. But now hearing from you that it was like, that was a bit annoying, that, why the hell would you do that?
Well, it naturally it didn't sit with me too well, but there was a couple guys on the crew, Norman for one. It infuriated him.
Wow.
And, those guys on that crew, Dale, were a little bit different, unique guys. They all had jobs. The only guys that worked there all the time was Jackie and Runt.
Mm-hmm.
And they were very dedicated. They wanted to win. They didn't care who it was.
Yeah.
They wanted to win. And the biggest race of your lifetime, and he knocks you out in the end.
Yep.
Yeah.
and then Haas rode him home.
How would you define the relationship with Cale before that race, between you and him?
Well, between me and him, I never had a problem with Cale. You know, I always felt, for a better explanation, that he was greedy. You know, he would do whatever it took to win a race or make the money. I never raced for money. I always got paid, but I never looked at a payoff sheet in my life ever that I know what first place paid. I raced to win. Banjo Matthews told me one time, he said, "You're the best race car driver I ever had, but you drive your car too damn hard." I said, well, it was my feeling that that's what you're supposed to do every time you get in the car, drive it that hard. I want to see you tell Dale Sr. he drove his car too hard. I mean, that's why I got in it. But a lot of times it hurt me.